Yeah.
rock and roll.
They can
We'll
really
keep you
be a
posted
pain.
too.
Thanks, appreciate it, Tom.
Absolutely. My wife, she's fun because you know it has the best pictures.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am calling to order the Central Dakota MPO Policy Board meeting for Thursday, October 23rd. We will begin with roll call.
All right, Thiessen.
Yep.
Olson.
Here.
Hedges.
Here.
Janser.
Here.
Feldall.
Here.
Rostad.
Here.
And Joyce.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. First item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from September 25th. These were included in the packet. What are your wishes?
Make a motion to approve the minutes.
Okay.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve the minutes. Is there any discussion, any corrections? Seeing none, let's go ahead and vote. Call the roll.
All right, Olson.
Yes.
Hedges.
Yes.
Janser.
Yes.
Feldall.
Yes.
Rostad.
Yes.
Joyce.
Yes.
And Thiessen.
Yes.
Our next item is a public hearing. This is a public hearing on the 2050 Metropolitan Transportation Plan. And to kick that off, we're going to have a presentation by Joel Mann with Bolton and Mank Incorporated. So, Joel, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, board members. I'm going to go ahead and start a presentation that we hope to keep very brief to leave time for question and answers. So if you'll bear with me a moment, I'm going to go through the shared screens here. And if this is up and ready to go, if someone doesn't mind just giving me, because I don't see the screen anymore,
Looks
a
good.
quick acknowledgement.
Looks good
We'll
to
get
us,
started.
Joel. It's looking good.
Thank you. Great. Well, we want to give a quick overview of the plan process through this presentation, and we'll do that by walking through the major components of the plan that are chapters of the plan document. But just to remind everybody who has participated through this process, of course, this is a long-range transportation plan through the year 2050. This is the first metropolitan transportation plan for the MPO being newly formed. And the typical function of these plans is to provide a long-range framework that looks at a fiscal constraint based on a reasonable forecast of expected formula funds and other resources that go into transportation projects. But this looks out at the entire metropolitan planning area, which is a subset of Ward County, including its 3 municipalities. The plan is covering a broad set of topics as well within transportation. This isn't just roads, but this is a multimodal plan that took into account several other topics and focus areas for the member jurisdictions of the MPO as they do their planning and project development. So this is intended to be comprehensive and to look out at all transportation needs for the region. The process by which we go through developing this plan includes many different steps. We'll talk through a few of those in more detail here in a moment, especially around the community engagement. But we kind of work through from a high level understanding of the region's needs and any past ambitions that the region had identified for transportation, work through those in a series of narrowing down alternatives and consider an overall constrained plan that fits within our resources, and that's where we end up. So if you follow the Mouse River here through town, we've gotten down to the end on the east side, and we are wrapping up the plan now at the end of our community engagement. So the engagement process that we've used throughout this followed 3 different primary phases. The first of these, which happened early, was kind of an open dialogue approach that took into account bigger questions about what the region wants to see for these kinds of large investments in public infrastructure. And this included a series of different kind of topic areas outside of just transportation. So this helped us to understand that the community in the Minot region really does value getting good returns on investment and making sure that anything that we are prioritizing, even if it's focused on transportation, is bringing us back a pathway to continued prosperity and economic growth and development. It's providing safety for the network, and it's keeping our existing infrastructure, not just new investments that we make, in a good state of repair. The second phase of the engagement, we had some more analysis finished at that point. We could dive into some more candidate solutions and recommendations for projects with this. So this part of the engagement helped us to get some feedback on concrete ideas of what the plan might include and some project suggestions. And it was helpful because it really got into a sense of priorities that people have for particular corridors or projects. It also, though, brought up this issue of, do we want to keep expanding our transportation system or maintain what we have? What's your feeling on what's more important? And we ended up with a pretty even split between rebuilding and, preserving what we have and investing in new mobility options. That was a key thing to help us frame how to balance out project candidates that were evaluated for the final plan. And the third phase of engagement, this is where we are now. We just finished up a presentation of this plan to member jurisdictions and North Dakota DOT's management committee earlier this week. And we will be moving from here into closing the public comment period Monday, the 27th, and summarizing the comments that came from that, addressing those comments as needed, and then presenting that to the technical advisory committee next month. If there isn't a need for additional comment period from the technical advisory committee, we will move toward completion of everything and adoption of the plan in December. So I'm going to go through the chapter components of the plan just to give an overview of its structure. The current conditions part of this plan that takes a look at where we are today also considered some recent plans and studies that have happened within the region. It's worth noting here, this came up in a recent discussion, that a lot of these plans look very new. It reflects that the Minot region has really taken a much more serious look at planning and thinking about these transportation issues in the last decade. So we have some great momentum to build on with this and some pretty fresh recommendations that came out of these studies that can fit well into this plan. But we're also noting that these studies helped us to identify the highest priorities for member jurisdictions. I'm pointing out the Broadway study here as kind of the leading example for the city of Minot. But each of the jurisdictions had things that they wanted to focus on, and taking a look at these recent studies helped us to identify that. But we looked more broadly at data-driven approaches as well, and some of the technical findings out of our analysis of that data and kind of current conditions helped us to identify our own ideas as a planning team that propose some projects above and beyond what were in those past plans and studies. So what we're getting in this plan is a mix of what's been studied recently and ideas that came from those efforts, as well as new ideas to come from this planning. It looked at things like safety and where we have real challenges in the network. It looked at all modes of transportation and considered what our opportunities and challenges are there. It took a look at transit. It's worth noting that there is a separate effort going on with the MPO right now for a transit development plan that looks at more technical facets of transit operations and needs for capital investment. That's currently happening, and we don't try to get in front of that too much because that's a more specialized study that North Dakota DOT and the Federal Transit Administration are used to seeing. So that's happening in parallel, but we did identify at a high level in this plan some opportunities for transit, and that study can explore further. So those engagement steps that I talked about a moment ago in thinking about broader returns for our investments than just transportation measures, these were important because they helped us frame out a series of goals that we used for this project. And those goals weren't just transportation either. It was things like economic development. It was things like providing efficient operations within our network. But the goals were important because they kept us on track to be thinking about what the key issues were in the transportation system and what we needed to be addressing. It's good to have some broad goals to keep you guided, but you really need to know what are the critical kind of technical issues that we need to cover, and how would a plan like this address them. So this kind of built off the existing conditions work. Think of the goals as kind of the compass to guide us to this part of the plan. But we ended up with a series of needs based around major kind of transportation topics or themes. And where those needs overlapped were the places that we saw, a greater kind of priority for potential investment. That will fit into later steps of our planning that I'll talk about in a moment. But it's worth reiterating too, this is a 2050 plan. This is looking out an additional 25 years from today. So it's really important to consider kind of where we would be in the future or what we would expect, to see for the future. So part of the work of this plan is that the MPO develops a forecasting model as part of a set of planning tools that allows some kind of future scenarios of potential growth in population, in jobs in the region, and how that moves around, how those population and jobs are linked up, and how the transportation system connects them. It allows us to look at that and understand where we would be with and without these investments. So this tool was useful to help us, kind of look at the current conditions, but look at where we would be in the future if we didn't make changes. But as a result of our plan recommendations, we use this as well to look at how those recommendations would help us would help us meet needs in the region and how the transportation system is expected to perform. So where all that comes together, all those candidate ideas, addressing those needs, meeting those goals, is in our plan itself. And I mentioned previously that we call this a fiscally constrained plan. That's the standard approach that MPOs need to use with their state and federal partners. But it's important because you want to make sure that a plan is realistic and can be implemented. So we had over 90 project candidates identified early on in this plan, representing a broad set of needs and desires from the member jurisdictions. But those come to about $500 million to construct. And that isn't what we have in terms of forecast revenue coming into the region. So it's important in a process like this to take a look at all of those different projects that represent not just the new expansion, but also the reinvestment and the reconstruction of the system to get that kind of 50-50 balance that we were looking for, and to start thinking through a process of how to prioritize these so that we can include in a fiscally constrained plan what we can actually afford, but then leave other project candidates for future opportunities in a more aspirational plan. So the way this worked, it's illustrated here in this diagram, is that the MPO is kind of taking on this role of looking ahead and programming future funds for transportation for the region. They're taking this role from NDDOT, which handled the role without an MPO in existence. But by doing that, NDDOT had already programmed out the sort of near-term projects for the next 5 years. So the short-term projects through 2030, if those were included in the statewide programming from the DOT, those kind of automatically roll into our fiscally constrained project list. Anything that would happen later than that, that's where we had to apply some screening measures and filter this out to be a more fiscally constrained plan. So we considered, was this a priority for local governments? If it is, there's going to be the political will for the local governments to contribute to the project cost and provide their local match. Did it have support from the public? That's going to kind of be the wind in the sails of that political will from the elected officials to keep those projects moving forward and have support. And then how did it fit in terms of our issues identification and the transportation needs? If we had multiple needs around safety or operations or capacity all aligning around a project, that project got evaluated with a higher score or a higher weight to move forward in this process because you're meeting more needs with the same amount of investment. It's a good, efficient way of using funds. So in doing that, we also think through the various funding sources that come into the MPO. These that are listed here in these colored icons represent different kind of principal funding categories. Most of them are coming from federal funding sources. But our kind of process here is that we figure out when we'd like to try to prioritize it in terms of that long 25-year period. We consider a project and how eligible it would be for different funding types. And then we try to make any of those funding types work to be as efficient as possible. And by doing this, we're kind of mixing between the funding sources, which is totally fine. But that allows us to best align our resources to our project needs and use those funds most efficiently. So we're getting more projects into that fiscally constrained plan and delivering more for the region. What we get as a result is a network that is really based on reconstructing a lot of these streets in Minot and the surrounding communities for safety and for some adjustments to operations. It's filling in a few key gaps around multimodal connections, especially for active transportation. And it's addressing a lot of safety challenges at kind of acute points throughout the region, like intersections that have some safety problems today, or shorter corridors. It's not making huge moves into building out a new network, but it's starting that. And I think one of the biggest candidate project series that was included in the plan early was the Southwest and Southeast connector. That's something that Ward County would like to lead. And you can see here on the map, if you can see the mouse kind of moving, that the first parts of that do fit into the fiscally constrained plan. That's a big, ambitious corridor overall, and it's got a pretty high price tag. So we start with what we can do, but then balance funds throughout the rest of the region. I'll show some highlights of those throughout the jurisdictions, because each of the 3 cities and Ward County had projects that they will be seeing as a result of this. Burlington was interested in some intersection improvements, a pedestrian bridge over Highway 2, and a multimodal trail connection. Those all fit within that fiscally constrained plan. Surrey had some sidewalk projects they really wanted to advance, and an intersection project to work with NDDOT on some safety-based issues at the the 2nd Street Southeast intersection at Highway 2. Those all fit into the plan. The county, its big pushes were some intersection improvements, similar kinds of issues around safety, and then that Southeast Southwest connector, the first kind of leg of it on the west that connects from Burlington and starts filling out that loop. Those fit into the plan overall. Then Minot, just kind of by nature of most of the population being there, they had the most project candidates. They have the most in the plan, but it's a mix of things. It's taking on some critical issues around Broadway and helping with reconstruction of that corridor at the first available funding opportunity when that could get built. But it's also looking at some strategic reconstructions. There's a lot of 4-lane streets in Minot today that don't really carry the traffic to justify 4 lanes anymore, and they're designed in a way that they actually have some safety challenges. So it's time in the life cycle of those streets to look at reconstruction, but the city's interested in reconstructing those in a way that promotes safety and gives some extra space to other users. But then we also have some multimodal corridors. The Broadway study that kind of laid out the Broadway corridor as the highest priority for the city acknowledged we can't fit all users into that corridor safely, so we want to find some alternative paths for bicycle and pedestrian movement to be given some more space. And then, filling in what isn't the highest priority for Broadway, it comes later, but it's still within that fiscally constrained plan. What doesn't fit into the fiscally constrained plan, when we've exhausted the resources we think we have coming in, is what we call the illustrative plan. So we want to keep these project ideas in the plan somehow, because what we program out for our forecast future funding amounts is only the formula funds that we know that the state and the region get from the federal government on an annual basis. There are other funding sources out there. They're competitive, they're more discretionary, they tend to be grants and things like that you have to apply for, but they could potentially move some of these project ideas forward. So it's important to keep them in the plan so that they are then eligible for those funding sources as well. But they're just not in that fiscally constrained amount. They would be considered in future updates to this plan that happen every 5 years. We also want to take a look, as we're moving ahead with the plan in place now, at some issues that need some deeper dives and additional study around particular topics and issues that might lead to some other project ideas, when the plan is updated, or might help the MPO and its member jurisdictions to better isolate some challenges they have at particular locations or around particular issues. So we've got a series of potential studies to move forward. And then in terms of funding overall, we just wanted to kind of close on this part of it, because this financial plan is part of the plan and how we demonstrate our fiscal constraint. We forecast out everything. This table is kind of a big, complex set of numbers, but this is all the different federal funding sources, and then the amount that is expected to come in these different planning timelines. What that breaks down to, in just kind of simple terms, is for any of those street or road-based projects from funding sources more tied to roads and highways, there's about $240 million expected to come into the region within this 25-year period. And for transit service, that's about 75 million. So when we look at what we can generate in terms of local governments, there are a few things to keep in mind. Using federal funds for transportation projects requires some local contribution or local match, as we call it. And typically that's 20% of the total project cost or total cost of what you're spending, with the federal sources picking up the other 80%. So for what Minot, just to use Minot as an example, would generate, they're looking at about $187 million that they would generate in their own locally based revenue over this planning period. But that represents everything that they're dealing with: local streets, maintenance, everything else. When you break this down at a much higher level, we have and sorry, these are a bit out of. I skipped ahead inadvertently, but Ward County, just by comparison, about 275 million. So when you look ahead at what they would be needing to spend, they need to cover about $79 million of local match to sort of balance what the federal share of these projects would be. But then there's still a bigger set of obligations that they need to think about too. So looking ahead at maintenance, we can keep there's enough revenue coming from the local jurisdictions and from federal sources that we can keep the system in a state of good repair, but it's worth keeping in mind that there's always more maintenance needs. There's always more outside of the kind of core transportation system that these federal funds can apply to. And it's worth keeping in mind that we always need to prioritize and value maintenance in this. So to wrap up in terms of next steps, you saw the slide a moment ago, but we're kind of finishing up this public comment period that will be closing Monday, and we will be addressing any comments that come from it. And if the technical advisory committee meeting and reviewing the results of that next month determines that we do not need another 15-day period for public comment, this will move forward to approval and adoption in the December series of meetings for the policy board and for the advisory committee. So that's our summary overall. We are happy to answer any questions, and thank you again for all the support and feedback throughout this planning process. It has been an honor for us to work with the MPO, and we are certainly proud and glad to be finishing up now.
I think she's. Try it again. Yeah, okay, that's
Oh,
better.
okay, I guess we're back. Sorry.
Yeah, here you go.
Okay, so I asked for questions and I'm seeing none, but so I guess one question I have is, so how much public input did we get? Or how much participation was there to drive some of these directions?
I would say the public input throughout the process, if you're referring to the earlier phases and not just during this comment period now, we had a pretty robust survey with over 150 responses. Just based on our work in NPOs and regions of a similar size, we feel like that's pretty good. This is a topic that the general public just doesn't really think about very much and engage much, and the survey didn't just gloss over things. The survey got into some more kind of advanced topics and asked questions at a deeper level. So to get 160 responses was good. Overall, in terms of the number of people who engaged with the website, who attended meetings, who spoke to us or emailed or asked questions, we touched over 1,000 individuals throughout this process, which we feel is pretty robust overall. I would say that the survey might have been the most helpful part of that because we did frame out a way of looking at project candidates and letting people score them. But the survey also included, it was kind of like a slider-based interface where you could say, how important is reconstruction to me versus new mobility? And people could kind of find that right balance for them. The survey allowed us to aggregate all of those responses together to come up with that average. And I think that was very important in shaping all of this, because, sometimes jurisdictions are excited about these federal funds to be able to keep building and adding to things. And I think being able to tell people we have pretty strong, regularly expressed support for balance between building and expanding and maintaining what we have. I think that's a pretty powerful message, and we wouldn't have gotten that without the robust outreach and input that we had.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? I'm not seeing any further questions, Joel, so thank you very much for your work and for your presentation, and we appreciate you being with us this afternoon.
Thank you all very much.
Okay, that takes us to item 3.2, which is a public hearing. This is an opportunity for anybody who would have wished to show up and talk to us about this topic to be here. I see no one coming forward, so we will move on. Do we need a motion to close the public hearing? Okay. Moved and seconded to close the public hearing. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. All right, public hearing is closed, and we move on to new business. Item 4 and item 4.1 is the information on monthly activities. This is something that was in the packet, obviously, and that we receive every month. Are there any questions of the executive director about that, or anything we need to talk about there? I see none, so we'll move on from that item. The next item is a 2026 safety performance measure PM1 target resolution. What are your wishes, board members?
Approve based on the tax recommendations.
Okay, moved and seconded by Thiessen. Any further discussion on this recommendation?
Any comments on the TAC?
The only comment was that these are statewide measures, and so what we're going to do is look at some more localized measures that we can possibly, gather our own data, and we'll see how much data we can gather and kind of formulate our own, see how much work it would be, but just to kind of gather more localized information so that we're making and addressing the issues using more localized data. At any event, as long as we're putting safety first, we'll be assisting the state in driving those numbers downward, and that's kind of the goal.
Is those decisions then basically decided by the policy board, or what's the process here?
Commissioner Fellow, so yes, these measures need to be adopted on an annual basis by the policy board. We can either choose to follow the states, or we can come up with our own. So what we are able to do is potentially work with the state to get a subset of data that's more localized and targeted for Minot and surrounding area, and again, hone in and be more refined in our effort. But in any event, as long as, of course, we're addressing the high crash areas, safety projects, inevitably that will reduce crashes and improve safety, and so then we're contributing positively towards that effort to improve safety across the state. So.
And that will go back to the DOT for approval, is that how it works?
Correct. So we just have to approve this, submit it off to NDDOT, and then effectively we're solid for a year. But yeah, in the meantime, between now and next year, when I represent this information, we're going to explore other data options to see if we can get some more localized data. And those discussions will happen at TAC to see how meaningful it is, and how much effort it takes to kind of compile it all and maintain it and make sure it's accurate, just so that we can, once you start tracking your own data, you want to make sure that you're on top of it and there's actual value in doing so. So It's just something that we have to have further discussion.
Dale Larson.
Yeah, just a comment add on to that. And I think even if we decided to continue, even if we gathered the data, we may still decide to stick with the state goals. But using that data, we may be able to focus in on areas that maybe we want to apply for weeks of dollars on. So I think we're still going to look at that data to see if we can use that data to create those safety projects. And we still just may stay with the state goals. But still using that data to actually create safety measures on there.
Thank you, Dana. And that definitely goes back to ensuring that Central Dakota operates and functions as a repository for a variety of data, not just necessarily these metrics, but this and beyond, because oftentimes grant applications require this and a breadth of other data statistics, and so we want to make sure that we're gathering everything. So hopefully that NPO, especially with the hiring of transportation specialists, we can start to compile all this regional data and then ideally be a one-stop shop and assist the member jurisdictions in their grant applications.
Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, call the roll, please.
Thiessen? Olson?
Yes.
Hedges? Janser?
Yes.
Fjellhall?
Yes.
Rosted?
Yes.
And Joyce?
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, thank you. That takes us to item 4.3, which is the monthly financial reports, which were included in the packet. There's a list of expenditures, income statement, and balance sheet. What are your wishes?
I move to approve the financial statements as presented.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve the financial statements as presented. Any discussion? Any questions? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Hedges?
Yes.
Janser?
Yes.
Fjellhall?
Yes.
Rosted?
Yes.
Joyce?
Yes.
Thiessen?
Yes.
And Olson?
Yes.
All right, that brings us to item 5, other business. 5.1, opportunity for public comment. Is there anybody who wishes to make any comment from the public? See no one at this point coming forward, so we'll move on. Item 5.2 is other business, if any. John, do you have anything, or is there?
I don't have anything in addition to what was presented today, so.
Okay, anybody else? Alderman Olson.
I may have missed it, but are there dates, November, December, are they changed at all? You may have sent an invite and I have not paid attention to it,
So as far as our November policy board
but
meeting,
November and December.
yeah, so it's going to be November 20th and then December 18th.
Okay.
So those were the two that were modified due to holidays at the beginning of the year.
Okay. And I'll look, you probably have some of the invitations.
Yeah, it should,
Yeah, okay,
yeah,
I'll-
yeah.
okay, thank you.
And if you don't see them, please let me know, and so I can make sure that your calendar's accurate.
December 1 was not sent. I have the November 1.
Okay, I will, I'll make sure that those are sent out again, because it sounds like,
20th and 18th.
yeah, okay.
Yeah, with holidays and such in there, you know, it's not always going to be exactly as normal, so.
Yeah, it's a little funky too when you're sending out a series, calendar series on the fourth Thursday, and then you modify two, so I'm not too surprised that the two that are modified are kind of, maybe didn't land. Okay.
Another thing I was just thinking about too is, I don't know how everybody else does it, but the county commission reorganizes in December. I don't know where our terms are at.
January.
You're gonna notify us on who has to reappoint.
Yes, yeah, that'll be an item on the agenda that will,
Track of it at the county necessarily.
yeah, so that's on an annual basis. I believe it was January when we took care of it last time, so I'll stick to that. I'll make sure to check the bylaws for any of those updates and the handover of the baton to the next lucky victim. I guess the chair and vice chair, so be thinking if you're wanting to
I'm
online
thinking of
first.
appointments from each entity.
Oh, okay, yeah, so it's the 2-year time frame. So I guess that's, because they are 2-year appointments,
Yeah, rotate, right.
other than city manager Joyce, who's by title and function for the city minor, so.
Yeah, the rest of us would have to be
Yes.
reappointed by our bodies,
Right.
presumably, so.
Yeah, we would be hitting that 2-year mark. This would be the first 2-year reappointment that needs to
So
occur.
I don't know how that stagger works, so maybe we got your help, but anyway.
So better look at that over the next couple of months.
Obviously, at the policy board, we're not going to be appointing, so I'm wondering if that's a conversation that you have with your respective councils.
Yes, we would need to do that, so, okay.
Is there anything that you need from me with regard to that, other than it's a 2-year appointment?
As
And
long as each body is aware of, well, it's this body, who's up.
okay, what I'll do is I'll make a note to reach out to the associated auditor slash, I presume, McKim Williams, things like that. So yeah, I'll reach out to the respective administrator that would handle making sure that item's on the agenda for your appointment or whomever's.
All right, sounds like a plan. I think we're on item number 6.
I'll make that motion.
Move to adjourn, is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Fellow. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. We're adjourned.
Thank you, sir.